So now we're going to try to build up a game of tic-tac-toe. Now this version won't necessarily include a win condition. I'll show you how to do that, but it's something that's going to be better served by knowing how to use loops effectively um, and arrays. But for our purposes, I'll show you a couple ways to get this done. One's going to involve some copying and pasting, and the other is going to involve uh, getting comfortable with a loop and an array. So to start out, we're going to make a new project using the template.zip file, and we're going to do this and name it TicTacToe. Now this is going to be written in p5.js, and we're going to look into this file template.html. We'll rename it to index, and we'll check it out. And right now it's a blank page. Going forward, we're going to be able to edit this blue with CSS, although I'll leave that up to you, and we'll be able to edit the canvas using JavaScript. Let's look at the contents of index.js and set ourselves up for some useful file manipulation later on. So you'll notice that we should probably change any comments, should change the title, and any instructions can be put here. This will be particularly useful for this game. Now, I'll leave that to you, but for our purposes, please pay attention to the fact that I am listing all necessary files in this index.html page. I'm using p5.js, I'm using template.js, and they're located in our JavaScript folder. We'll also be making a new file for ourselves for this, and it's going to be a class file for one of the squares of our tic-tac-toe. So we're going to call it a grid box, and we'll put it in a gridbox.js file. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to open the JS folder, we're going to drag over template.js, and this is going to be our game proper. I'll move the background into draw, and at the top, I'm going to write that this is where our game logic lives. Now, there are a couple things we care about with tic-tac-toe. One is that we're going to have a bunch of grid boxes. There are a couple ways we're going to implement this, but first I'm going to talk about what a grid box is. It's a square with a border that's going to have a letter inside. And that letter could be X, it could be O, or it could be nothing. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can construct this so that we can interact with it using mouse clicks. Alternately, you can choose different colors instead of X and O. Checking that will be a little bit different, but I'll leave that as an option. So, to start out, let's make a new file and call it gridbox.js. Notice we're saving it in our JS folder under TicTacToe. So first, we're going to make a constructor function. We're going to name it gridbox. This is our definition of our object. So this is where we will define all information related to one of these squares on a tic-tac-toe board, and we'll also include all functions necessary. The information will be the following. We'll probably need an X, a Y, a width, a height, probably a letter variable, and then we'll need, for functions, we'll need a show and probably a letter change. to change a letter. And also reset if you want to implement or restart, if you want to implement a restart function. So we're going to start out with our info. We're going to say that the width is equal to the width of the page divided by 3. Likewise, the height will be the height of the page divided by 3. And we'll just set x to 0 and y to 0 to start out. We'll be changing this later. We also want to set this.letter to be equal to an empty set of quotes. That just means it's going to be a letter, but there's really nothing there. It's an empty string. Now we're going to make our functions. One is going to show our grid box. We're going to fill it with 0 or 255. We're going to do a stroke of 0, meaning we're going to set our lines to black. We're going to do a stroke weight of 5 to make a 5 pixel thick line. And we'll do a rectangle. And rectangles are filled with the x value, y value, width, and height of our object. This.x says this variable w belongs to the grid box. It is the grid box's w. And this is a way of saying certain variables are associated directly with our object or with our class. So we're saying the grid box is x, grid box y, grid box width, and grid box height are going to be what determine our rectangle. We're also going to have to do some text generation. So we're going to fill with 0, black, and we're going to make a text size of 50, and we're going to say that we have text with this.letter as the text we want. Remember, this is the text we care about, then its x value and its y value. And the location will be this.x plus this.w over 2 minus 20, and this.y plus this.height over 2 plus 20. And this is just, you could do this.x plus this.width over 2. You could do some number here, but generally this will make sure that our letter is centered. If you play around with this argument and this argument, those just tell us where to show our letter. If you want to change those in any way, go ahead, especially this term here, to make sure you're centered. Now, one thing that we need to do also is this letter change. And this letter change will make it so that our letters change when we click. Now, we're just going to say how our letters cycle. We're going to say if this.letter is triple equal to empty quotes, this.letter should change to an x. Otherwise, if this.letter is triple equal to x, what do we want to change to? We want to change our letter to O. And finally, if it is O, it's the only other thing it could be, we want to recycle. We want to set back to empty. Now, if you're using color for this, you'll have 3 variables for color. You'll have an R, a G, and a B. And then you'll change those accordingly here. You'll set the R to 0 and the G to 255 or something like that. And then green to 0 and the blue to 255, and then you'll cycle back and forth. But this is all you really need to be able to change a letter. Now let's see what this looks like when we make one. First, we'll go up here. We'll say we have a variable called box. We'll name it box1. And we'll say box1 equals new grid box. And then in draw, we'll say box1.show. So we've made a variable box. We've stored inside of it a new grid box, a new square that represents one of the tiles on TicTacToe, and we're going to show it. So let's see what this looks like. Now we have this square in the corner. Now I'm clicking and nothing's happening. But one thing that I can do is I can go here and I can say, hey, function mouse clicked, and when we click the mouse, if the mouse X is less than or is greater than box1.x and mouse X is less than box1.x plus box1.w, and mouse Y is greater than box1.y, and mouse Y is less than box1.y plus box1.w, we'll say box1.letterChange. So what does this look like? We'll refresh, and I'll click in the box, and we get an X, an O, or nothing, depending on how many times I click. Now, another thing you might want to say is, well, wait, this is only one box. I have to have 9 of these. Well, yeah, you might. You might have to. If you don't want to use loops, you're going to have to do this, copy and paste it 9 times, with box 1, with box 2, with box 3, with box 4, etc., up to 9. And you're going to have to do the same thing here with show. And you're going to have to make something here, box 2 equals new grid box. And the issue also is, well, what's our new X and Y location? Let's say box2.x equals, width over 3 or something, or, whatever it is. And you'll have to keep track of all the new variables. One way to make this a little easier is to go into your grid box and to say, hey, I want an A and a B to be my inputs. And I'll just set X to A and Y to B. And over here, I can say that, well, I want to start out at 0, 0. Then I want to be at 150, 0, or something like that, or 166.6. No, not 1. Well, I can't add. Yeah, 166.6. So, or width over 3, 0. And box 3 equals new grid box 2 times width over 3, comma 0. And then box 4 would be new grid box 0, comma width over 3, etc. And you'd have to keep making your boxes till you filled up all 9 possibilities. And the way to do this, you'd see box2.show, box3.show, box4.show, and let's see which ones we made. We made these ones. So you can see that this, each one of these, they don't work except for the first one. So I'd have to go over here, and I'd have to change this if statement to say, okay, box 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. So you can see this will be really tedious if you go with this method. Now, there are ways around this. There are ways to make this easier. There are ways to make this more convenient. I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to recommend that you go with this direction. Okay, so instead of making a bunch of box variables, I'm going to make something called a box list. And box list is going to be set to an empty array. Now, this box list can be added to. We can just add boxes to this list as we go. And because we have this way of saying, hey, any one of our grid boxes is going to have some new values that we determine, we can say that box list 0, or box list.push, we're going to push onto our list a new grid box with 0, 0. And we can do box list.push, we'll add another one, new grid box 0, width over 3, for example. That would be another way to go about this. When you want to access the things on your box list, you'll say box list position 0. The first position is always going to be position 0 dot show. And likewise, over here, we can say box list 0 dot x, box list 0 dot letter change, and change all these to box list 0. Obviously, that's not really any better. So we're going to have to take advantage of doing the same task over and over again with a loop. So we can say for, and we're going to make a for loop. And what we're going to say is, we're going to start with a variable I, set it to 0. When, as long as I is less than 3, we'll increase I by 1 after we go through our operation. What this will do is it'll make a new grid box 3 times and add it to the list. They'll all have coordinates 0, 0. Starting at 0, we do this. We increase our I value, and now we see if I is less than 3, and then we add another box to the list until we increase I to 4, I is no longer less than, and we increase I to 3, I is no longer less than 3, so we continue on with our journey. Now, that would make 3 boxes. We could make 9. But it may be nice to have 2 variables to be able to change this to I, and maybe this to some sort of j value. So another way to think about this is you can say rows and then you can say this is calls, and you'll have another for loop inside. And this way, what I get is I'll get the numbers 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 0, 2, 1, and 2, 2. So we'll get sort of 9 different boxes this way. Now they won't have the right x coordinates, and the way to fix that is to just multiply by width over 3. And multiply by height over 3. And that'll give us the right x and y values. It's just a little bit of multiplication math, and we repeat it. I encourage you to try out some numbers here. for rows and columns and see what the X and Y values we get will be. Now we do the same thing when we want to show these boxes. We'll say, just going through the list, we'll say that we'll start at element 0, while element is less than box list.length, however many boxes we have, we'll increase the element by 1. So now what we can say is box list position element, whatever the current element is that we're on, whatever element is, it starts as a 0, show box list 0. Then element increases, and we'll show box list 1. Then element increases, we show box list 2. Likewise, we can put a loop around here, and instead of element, I'm just going to use the letter I. It's pretty common convention. It's shorter than saying element, and we can just always know that we're talking about moving through a list this way. We'll use the same structure, wrap it around our if statement, and then change all of these to box list position I dot x, box list position I dot w, and I'll refresh the page, and suddenly I have all 9. And then I click anywhere, and it will fill up properly. Now the question is, how do I make this automatically detect a win? Well, there's a way to do this, and you could totally do this in a few different ways and do it algorithmically. But one way I'll show you right now, I'll make a function called check state, and this will check to see what the state is. So I'll say if box list 0 dot letter is equal to box list 1 dot letter, and box list 1 dot letter is equal to box list 2 dot letter, and box list 2 dot letter by the transitive property is not equal to empty quotes. We'll write text, you win, or game over, because someone won maybe. And this will just be some text in the center of the page. And that will handle one particular case when I use it by saying in draw, check state. So every time draw repeats, I check to see if someone won. And in this case, it'll pay attention to these columns, or this column, only when it's not empty. Now, the full version of this can be seen in a sample that I have here, where we go through and we can see that we have the first grid space and the second grid space and the third grid space
are all equal, and the third grid space is not empty. And likewise, for all the other 7 combinations, we pay attention to those and we print out game over if that's the case. But for our purposes here, you're welcome to have this game include this check state. You're welcome to have it not include this check state. You're welcome to include this this array method, or you can manually do this. It'll be a little tedious, but you're welcome to do it that way. But this is a version of TicTacToe that's reasonably accessible and uses p5.js. Thanks.